Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, where we come together as a group in order to do some meditation together and to also study the Pali Canon in English, which we're using this book series, The Words of the Buddha. We're in volume 11, which is The Realms of Existence, chapters 66 through 103. If you don't have access to this book, you can download it using the link that's available wherever you're seeing this, or you can continue to stay in the class without the book, because we're going to be displaying it on the screen today. So you don't actually need to have read the book in order to get benefit out of today's class. But if you've read the book ahead of time, then you may have questions that you're going to be able to ask as we go through the class. And if this is your first time joining us, then you'll be able to download this book and join into the program, because there's a total of 13 volumes in this book series. This particular program, the Pali Canon and English Study Group, studies volume 2 through 13. The group learning program, which is on Sunday and Wednesday, that program studies volume 1 exclusively. And we go through and progress one chapter a week on Sundays, and then on Wednesdays we do meditation in order to help you build up your meditation practice. This program is people who've kind of moved beyond the group learning program, or maybe actually doing both of them at the same time. In this particular program, we're studying exclusively the words of the Buddha and helping you to understand the teachings of the Buddha, not as belief, not as something that you should believe in, but something that you can learn, you can reflect on, and you can practice in order to get benefit and how to make wiser and wiser decisions in your life in training the mind to enlightenment, or this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. We start out this program on Saturdays with doing breathing mindfulness meditation together as a group to help clear the mind and prepare it for learning the Buddhist teachings. By doing meditation prior to learning, it helps you to actually retain the teachings of what it is that you've learned in the program. Because the way that you actually improve the condition of your mind is do this intellectual learning, which is what we're doing today. And the more that you can remember those teachings, then you can reflect on those teachings and see the truth in them. And with remembering and reflecting on these teachings, you're then able to practice the teachings in daily life and actually see the progress as the condition of the mind in your life gradually improve. If you weren't able to remember the teachings, you wouldn't be able to reflect on them, you wouldn't be able to practice them. So in the Buddha's time, there was just oral teachings, and that was it. But today we've got books, videos, audiobooks, podcasts, we've got online classes, we've got the ability to reach out and seek guidance all across the world using this amazing technology that we have. So there's lots of ways to help you take in this content and learn it intellectually. And having a meditation practice will help you to retain that learning for longer periods of time so that you can apply these teachings in your life. So let's go ahead and do our meditation together, just a short meditation just to kind of prepare the mind, and then we'll explore chapters 66 through 103, which is all about heavenly beings and the heavenly realm. So I'd like to invite you to pull up a meditation cushion or a chair or whatever it is that you'd like to meditate, either the seated, lying, or standing position. Make the lower body comfortable. The upper body should be nice and erect. By keeping the upper body erect, it keeps the mind attentive and alert so that you can actively train the mind. We're not actually going to relax here in our meditation. While meditation shouldn't be intense, it shouldn't be relaxed either. It should be active. It should be involved. The mind should be attentive and alert, because you're working to apply the teachings of cutting off the thoughts, letting them go, and bringing the mind back to the breath. So in order to keep that mind attentive and alert, we use the upper body to stay erect or upright in order to keep the mind attentive and alert. Next, place your hands and arms into your lap. Usually the Buddha would place his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and if that's comfortable, you can do that. Or you might just place your palms on your thighs or your knees, or maybe your arms on the armrest of a chair. Then just close the eyes with the body just completely relaxed except for the upper body, where you're going to keep that erect to keep the mind attentive. You would like to close the eyes and just start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Take some nice natural breaths, breathing in and out. Experiencing the full breath, breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Your breath doesn't need to match up to the guidance that I'm providing. These are just cues or just reminders for you to gradually breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Work on that breath as I do some chanting just to kind of ease us into meditation, and you're welcome to join along if you know these chants. And then I'll be back with some guidance to further help you soak into meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sampuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasati Satatawa Manusanang Bhuto Bhagavati. Okay, you should be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. The breath is the present moment. You would like to train the mind to fixate on the breath, the sound of the breath, or the sensation of air entering into the nose. This is the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. As the mind's fixated on the breath, wherever you notice that it moves off the breath, either to the past or future thoughts, maybe ideas, perceptions, wherever you notice that, just cut it off and let it go. Bring the mind back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. I'm going to let you do this work of training the mind to come back to the breath. Wherever you notice it's not on the breath, the present moment, just cut it off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอะภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมพุทโธสัคขะโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, we'll come into our normal class where you guys are able to ask questions on the chapters. Chapter 66 through 103 is what we studied this week, and they're all related to the heavenly realm or the heavenly beings. So if you'd like to ask a question, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can just put that into the comment section. Our moderators, Manal and Bassam, will see that, and be sure your question gets asked during the class so that I can answer it. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions that you'd like. So I'll just turn the class over to you guys to see what questions, if any, that you guys have related to the chapters that we studied this week.
Hi, Teacher David. There's no questions on Zoom at the moment. We'll try to see if Bassam has any questions.
Okay.
Yes, we have a question here on Facebook from Biblog. It says, Sir, I do not understand chapter 96.
Okay, let's look at chapter 96. Okay. Let's go through this one. Chapter 96. It's titled, No Such Possibility for a Woman to Become a Buddha. Okay. Before we start reading, let's be sure we understand what a Buddha is. A Buddha is a person who has attained enlightenment by themselves without any help of any teachers whatsoever. So through their own independent journey, they've attained enlightenment. They've eliminated all the 10 fetters from the mind. They fully, deeply understand the teachings that lead to enlightenment, and they've accomplished that goal of attaining enlightenment on their own without any support or any input or any influence or guidance from any teacher at all. Then, during the course of their life, they guide countless other people to attain enlightenment. So they will dedicate the rest of their life to sharing the teachings that they discovered on an independent basis through their own pursuit to enlightenment. They will dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those teachings. And then through their efforts, they will guide countless more people to enlightenment over the rest of their life. Then the third kind of major criteria that makes a Buddha is that upon their death, they leave the teachings in such a condition that countless more beings will be able to attain enlightenment through their teachings being shared through other people. So their students from their lifetime, a Buddha's students will then continue to share the teachings into the world after a Buddha's death, and countless more people will continue to attain enlightenment after that. So here we are 2,500 years later. This individual that was once known as Siddhartha Gautama, who we now refer to as Gautama Buddha, he attained enlightenment on his own. He dedicated 45 years of his life, the remaining part of his life, guiding countless people to enlightenment. Nobody even truly knows how many people attained enlightenment during his lifetime because there was no count. They're countless. Then he left the teachings in such a condition with his students that people have continued to attain enlightenment from that time even until today. There's still people attaining enlightenment today. So this is the three primary criteria that makes a Buddha a Buddha. And with this chapter titled, "There's No Such Possibility for a Woman to Become a Buddha," let's read through it and see what it actually shares, because it's fairly short. Ananda, this is one of his closest students. A monk understands it is impossible, it cannot happen that a woman could be a fortunate one, a fully perfectly enlightened one. There is no such possibility. And he understands it is possible that a man might be a fortunate one, a fully perfectly enlightened one. There is such a possibility. He understands it is impossible, it cannot happen that a woman could be a wheel-turning monarch. There is no such possibility. And he understands it is possible that a man might be a wheel-turning monarch. There is such a possibility. He understands it is impossible, it cannot happen that a woman could occupy the position of Saka. There is no such possibility. And he understands it is possible that a man might occupy the position of Saka. There is such a possibility. He understands it is impossible. It cannot happen that a woman could occupy the position of Mara. There is no such possibility. And he understands it is possible that a man might occupy the position of Mara. There is such a possibility. He understands it is impossible, it cannot happen that a woman could occupy the position of Brahma. There is no such possibility. And he understands it is possible that a man might occupy the position of Brahma. There is a possibility. Okay, so he talks about different types of beings here. The first one being a Buddha, a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha. He's saying that it's not possible for a woman to become a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, meeting those three criteria, those three main criteria. Then he goes on to say that a woman cannot be a wheel-turning monarch. A wheel-turning monarch is a ruler, a king, somebody who is guiding the population of people in their kingdom based on the teachings of the Buddha. And this is considered to be quite an accomplishment. If somebody decides that they're going to rule over their kingdom through these teachings of the Buddha, then that means that, if people are killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, or taking substances that cause heedlessness, this is all going to be dealt with according to, certain gamma, or certain results are going to happen for them. So in this kingdom, I'm sure that the king would outlaw substances that cause heedlessness, and there would be pretty stiff penalties for someone who kills or steals or has sexual misconduct or lies or who uses substances that cause heedlessness. And all the other teachings of the Buddha would be shared, and kind of the people would be governed over by the king as through these teachings. So that's what we call a wheel turning monarch. The wheel here is the Dhamma wheel. The Dhamma wheel is turned by a Buddha. When a Buddha awakens, he turns this Dhamma wheel, which is kind of a figurative way of essentially saying that civilization has stepped forward when a Buddha comes into existence. When there's a real, live, breathing, living Buddha in existence, this person's going to have deep, deep, deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment and be able to guide countless other people to enlightenment. So this is seen as a big step forward when a Buddha comes into existence, and the Buddha will turn the Dhamma wheel. It's kind of a figurative way of saying civilization has stepped forward. And with those teachings, then if a king chooses to study with a Buddha, then they're going to understand the teachings very deeply and be able to kind of govern or rule over their kingdom through these teachings. And that's considered to be a wheel-turning monarch. And this person can be quite influential in helping the population of their kingdom to be able to live in harmony and peacefully. Because if a ruler or a king deeply understands these teachings, then they're in a very influential position to be able to help many people and influence many people in order to progress on this path through making kind of rules in their kingdom related to these teachings. So that's what a wheel-turning monarch is. And the Buddha is saying that it's not possible for a woman to be this person. The next one, if I remember correctly, and I'd like to look it up for a second, this word Saka, or this position, I believe it's the highest heavenly being. And it makes sense because that's what we're studying in this part, is about heavenly beings. But let me just use the internet here and see. Yes. So what this position is all about is this position is the kind of highest of heavenly beings. And the Buddha is saying that that position can't be held by a woman. And then this next one, Mara. This is an entity that is considered to be, in other traditions, the devil or Satan or Lucifer. This is a evil entity that influences unskillful conduct amongst people and tries to influence their mind to perform unskillful conduct. So kind of like the being that kind of oversees hell is the way we typically will think about Mara, or the devil or Satan. And the Buddha is saying that being can't be a woman either, that it's not possible. And then this last one, Brahma, this is the way that people during the lifetime of the Buddha referred to God. They considered Brahma to be God. And they actually believed in multiple gods in this region of the world that the Buddha lived in. But Brahma was kind of like the god of gods, the great God. And the Buddha is saying it's impossible for a woman to have that role as well. So that's what chapter 96 is talking about.
So David, would you please share the screen on the Zoom?
Oh, sure. There we go. So there's no such possibility for a woman to become a Buddha.
Okay, great. I was interested to ask a question related to chapter 83.
Okay.
I think the Buddha here is talking about Lord of the Heavenly Beings. By the way, he mentions that the name of Lord of Heavenly Beings is Saka. So I think that the Buddha here was referring to himself, his previous existences. If this is true, my question is, does previous existences necessarily relate or be similar to the current existence, or let's say the last existence of an enlightened being? I mean that here he's talking about someone who is really very wholesome, someone who is very generous, someone who is helping others, someone who is caring for others. So is it necessary that previous existences are similar to current or last existence?
There's not a direct correlation necessarily, but for a Buddha, there's going to be previous existences where they're learning and acquiring wisdom about the teachings in order to become a Buddha. So someone who, say, was a mass murderer in their previous life before this, they're not going to gain enough wisdom to, in their very next life, become a Buddha. That's not the way that any of this works. In order for a Buddha to become a Buddha, they gain a deep amount of wisdom during the lifetime when they become a Buddha, but in the lifetimes prior to that, they will have acquired a lot of wisdom about these teachings as well. So the Buddha talks about all of his different existences at different points in his teachings, and he talks about even times where he was God and he was able to kind of have this all-knowing, all-powerful abilities, and he talks about all these different ways that he gained wisdom in previous lives that led to him becoming a human being and ultimately becoming a Buddha. So in terms of a Buddha, yes, you're going to see this gradual progression of each life becoming more and more wholesome and leading to more and more wisdom. But in terms of an average person, that's not necessarily going to be the case, because you can actually move in and out of these different realms. You can, be a human, go to the heavenly realm, drop down to afflicted spirits, down to hell, back up to human, back to animal. You can be moving all throughout these realms at different times before you ultimately land into a human birth that you eventually gain the wisdom that you need in order to attain enlightenment in that particular human existence or in that heavenly existence. But not everybody is going to experience a connection of wholesome, more wholesome. Now you're an actual Buddha. You're going to experience much more, bouncing around in the different realms. And all of us are going to experience countless existences in the animal realm, or have already experienced countless existences in the animal realm, just to be able to get to where we are in the human realm today. But there's not necessarily a connection, Basam, between existences.
Yeah, great. Okay, so one more question. I see that the Buddha was talking and sharing with practitioners the result of their deeds, where these deeds or where the results are leading to. If it's in a heavenly realm, animal realm, afflicted spirits, or hell realm. But I think that he never shared anything about what kind of deeds or karma led to the human existence.
I haven't seen that specifically, because he's teaching he's teaching to humans who are already human, and how they would get to heavenly realm or how they would get to the lower realms. But he's not teaching to an afflicted spirit of how to get to the human realm, or he's not teaching to a animal of how to get to the human realm, or a hell being how to get to the human realm. So he's teaching humans how we move throughout these different realms. There are a few places where he talks about how a human can be reborn as a human. He talks about that, and he even adds on to that, if you practice in this way, you will either be reborn as a human, or actually he says, if you practice in this way, you'll be reborn as a heavenly being, and if not a heavenly being, you will be reborn as an influential human being. So there are places where he talks about that kind of stuff, like how to go from human to human, but not from any of the other realms to human.
Okay, so knowing that the human realm is the best place maybe to attain enlightenment, maybe better than a heaven realm. So do you think that the karma which leads to human realm, or which leads to being reborn in a human realm, is more wholesome than that which lead to being reborn in a heavenly realm?
No, the karma that leads to the heavenly realm is more substantial than what leads to the human realm. But the reason why the human realm is ideal for attaining enlightenment is because we experience all three types of discontentedness, and we have the ability to cultivate our consciousness. In the heavenly realm, they only experience pleasant feelings. They do have the ability to cultivate their consciousness, but they oftentimes lack motivation. So in terms of whether you were going to be reborn in a human realm or a heavenly realm, a lot of people would say they would prefer to be reborn in a heavenly realm because they're only going to experience pleasant feelings. But if you ask my personal opinion is the human realm is ideal because you're going to experience all three feelings. You have the ability to cultivate the consciousness. You're going to have the motivation and the ability to attain enlightenment in this realm. But people hear about this heavenly realm and how much pleasant feelings are there, and people oftentimes have a wish or a desire to be reborn in the heavenly realm. But that's not the goal of these teachings, and in order to attain enlightenment, a being has to eliminate any desire to be reborn anywhere, including a heavenly realm.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Let's go to Manal for Zoom questions.
Yes, just a follow-up question, Teacher David. First one is, I believe you've already described what devas are, but could you please expand on that?
Yeah, so you're going to see different ways in Buddhist literature of how to refer to these heavenly beings. The most common way that you'll see is you'll see the word deva. I don't encourage you to think of this as an angel. Some people will oftentimes translate that to be an angel because an angel is something very different in other traditions. And if we use that word in this tradition, it's going to really confuse you about what we're really talking about here. I translate the word deva as heavenly being. And the Buddha, when he talks about heavenly beings, he talks about different categories of heavenly beings, many different categories of heavenly beings. But whenever you see the word deva, you can just think generally as a heavenly being. And that's the best way to think of it, that it's a formless being, so there's no physical form, but they still have feelings, they still have perceptions, they still have volitional formations, which are choices or decisions, and they still have a consciousness. So they don't have that first of the five aggregates that we have, which is form, but they have the other four aggregates. They are in the formless realm.
Okay. So would you say that the heavenly beings is a realm which is a holding space for either going up or upwards or going down in terms of going back to being human form or to be liberated and not to be reborn? So I'm trying to further understand the purpose of the heavenly realm, and as you've noted, it's not a place where you would want to be reborn because everything is a good feel, everything is enhanced, and everything is positive, and so you may not be motivated to achieve further in your path. Why would there be a realm then? Why would there be such a place where you essentially still have to work harder, but you have everything good?
Yeah, so I think this falls into the category of what the Buddha described as speculation about the world. And you remember that he said that anybody that if we try to do that, then it's only going to lead to either madness or frustration. And why these realms 5 that we have and why they're actually that way, all I can say is it's part of the natural laws of existence, and it just is. That's just the way that it is. And the purpose of why it was created this way, you'll have to ask somebody that has actually done the creation of these, which that person or that entity, that being, isn't necessarily someone that you have access to right now. So it would just be speculation, and there's really no good answer for that. It's just the way that it is.
Understand. It just the distinction between the other realms. It's such a clear difference between afflicted spirits and animal and human, and then you get to heavenly. It's the distinction is, somehow the mind is not able to capture the significance of that. Maybe there isn't anything that I need to really capture with that, but just trying to compare, between the realms. But I do see your point, and there might not be an answer there.
Yeah, there's oftentimes questions that we come up with like this that we're always, curious about, because, this whole path is about gaining wisdom, asking questions, understanding, gaining insight, and progressing in our wisdom. And the mind oftentimes comes up with a lot of different questions like this. But one of the things to always keep in mind is, what's the real central and core path that's going to lead to the elimination of discontentedness. And one of the things that you can ask yourself, you can say, okay, well, if I know it's great that you ask this question, and you should always ask your teacher questions, but you can reflect on this in this way, is that, okay, if I know the answer of why the heavenly realm was created, how does that help me to eliminate discontentedness? And the answer is that it really doesn't. It's just kind of information. Or if you didn't know the answer to this question, and you're never going to get an answer, because there's nobody here on earth that could ever answer that question of why the heavenly realm was created. So having never be able to get that answer, does that hinder you in any way from attaining enlightenment? And the answer is no, because it's not part of the core path to enlightenment. So I always like to keep people focused on that real core path of what really leads to the elimination of discontentedness. And the Buddha shares the same thing, is that he always talked about the teachings that he shared are only what's needed in order to attain enlightenment. But some of these teachings about these different realms and so forth, it really isn't core and central to the elimination of discontentedness. It's just kind of interesting to know. And I think that's probably what this question falls into the category for you, that you're just interested to know.
Right. And it's funny, but I actually didn't know that the heavenly realm is formless. For some reason, that completely missed, my comprehension was that they actually have form. I don't know how I retained that, but it's interesting, as you say.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it just doesn't lead to, even going into this book, it's not until we get towards the end of the book that there's some really interesting teachings that really help to further you on this path to enlightenment. And where these realms come into play, and some of these teachings that I think that the Buddha shares, which are really wise, is it shows you the connection between the things that are part of that core central path, like the 5 precepts and the Eightfold Path and practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. He really connects for you and shows you that, okay, if somebody speaks harsh, this is what it leads to in this life, and this is what it leads to in future lives. And I think that can be somewhat motivating in terms of ensuring that you build up your practice. And the same thing, like, okay, if you practice generosity, this is what it leads to in this life, and this is what it leads to in future lives. And that's where I feel these teachings on the various realms really can help a practitioner to attain enlightenment, because you can see the benefits of practicing these teachings.
Right. I'm going to read Nick's questions. He has a series of questions related to chapters 88 through 91.
Okay.
His first question is, how do chapters 88 through 91 tie together? They are similar but not the same. They state different qualities achieve the same outcomes. The question is, are they all or just one at a time?
Let me scan through these, Nick, and see what you're kind of relating to. See future destinations. These are actually good examples of what I was actually just saying, which is how the Buddha is connecting all the teachings that you would have been learning as the core and central part of this path to rebirth. That's what these chapters are doing. So here, chapter 88, it looks like he's going into teaching about the jhanas and the attainment of jhanas in that first of the four. And he talks about this as part of the Eightfold Path, but here he's connecting this and saying, okay, this is a rebirth not shared with worldlings. So essentially, if someone attains the jhanas, what he's saying in this first jhana, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings of the pure abodes. So he's saying if somebody reaches to that first jhana, then they can be predicted to experience a heavenly rebirth, right? But getting to the jhanas is what's really important. It's like let's focus on that. That's the real important thing there. And let's not even focus on getting to the heavenly realm. Let's focus on moving past the jhanas into the 4 stages of enlightenment and actually attain enlightenment, so that you don't ever get to the heavenly realm. Because while it sounds great that someone who gets to the jhanas will move into the heavenly realm, but the goal is to never be reborn ever again. So while this is interesting and it's helpful because you know that all your efforts and all your work to move on this path is going to pay off and is going to be beneficial, but the goal is to not ever be reborn in that heavenly realm. And here he says, this rebirth is not shared by worldlings. So people who are stuck in craving, anger, and ignorance, not yet having gotten to the jhanas, they're not going to be able to experience this heavenly rebirth. And added to this, which I'll share, that the Buddha shares in other parts of his teachings, is while this being who reaches the first jhana may be reborn in the heavenly realm, there's no guarantee they're going to attain enlightenment there. Beings are reborn from the heavenly realm down into the other realms all the time. So while this sounds interesting, like, yeah, that's great, if I get to the first jhana, I'll maybe, it looks like I'm going to be moving into the heavenly realm, but once you're there, the mind's still discontent. There's still lots of work to do. So might as well do that work here in the human realm and just avoid being reborn altogether. And if you go through these, okay, so he's talking about the second jhana, he's talking about the third jhana and the fourth jhana. So that was what the first one's all about. All the different jhanas create rebirth into the heavenly realm. This one here is related to the Brahma Viharas. So he's saying, someone who's practicing loving kindness and eliminating ill will and hatred, anger, right? And that person, he's going to be reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings of Brahma's company. So that's, the way they considered God during that time. And then he goes through compassion, and then this one would be sympathetic joy, and then equanimity. So he's connecting the teachings of the core path to this rebirth, right? And showing you how, okay, if you focus on this core path, it's going to lead to enlightenment. That's where the real ultimate goal is. But if for some reason you fall short of that, all of these qualities of mind that you're cultivating in a next rebirth is going to lead to a improved and better rebirth. So we could go through all of these, Nick, but that's essentially what he's doing, is he's connecting each of the teachings. Here he's got the Brahma Viharas connected with the five aggregates, talking about a heavenly rebirth, right? And then here, these are those other abodes or other dwellings beyond the jhanas. They're kind of, people will experience this space of infinity, this consciousness of it, or this infinity of space. These others are kind of, they're not jhanas, they're not stages of enlightenment, but they're kind of like additional things that some people experience as part of moving through the jhanas, but not everybody experiences them. So hopefully that answers your question.
He does have another more specific question related to this. Does this matter, or should we just focus on the takeaway that worldlings drop back down to animal realm, afflicted spirits or hell, and noble practitioners do not?
Correct. Noble practitioners are, the Buddha described noble disciples, or what you're using as noble practitioners, as the people who are practicing very, very, very deeply and have attained, some attainments in the jhanas, and particularly the 4 stages of enlightenment. Once somebody has moved into the 4 stages of enlightenment, in that first stage, they're not going to fall back into the lower realms. They're done with the lower realms once you've attained that first stage of enlightenment. But if you've only attained the jhanas, while the Buddha here is saying that you will be reborn in your next life into the heavenly realm, after that birth, you can actually be reborn into the lower realms. You haven't escaped the lower realms just by getting to the jhanas. So this is why a lot of people here in Thailand, they set their goal just to get to the first stage of enlightenment. That's kind of like what they're going for, because they know that in no more than 7 rebirths in the human realm, they will attain enlightenment. But I don't suggest anybody does that. I think that's very dangerous. You set your goal for the first stage of enlightenment, you end up in the jhanas or below that. So instead, I suggest everybody set their goal for enlightenment, the 4th stage of enlightenment, as an arahant. And this is what the Buddha did too. He encouraged people to set their goals to enlightenment, not to these other stages. But once you get to that first stage, then you'll never be reborn down into the lower realms ever again.
He continues to ask, and is it true that worldlings have to drop back down from the devas to animal realm, afflicted spirits and hell, and not human beings? They have to go one of the lower realms first before human.
I haven't seen where the Buddha explained exact sequencing like that, but he explained that it's very rare for somebody to be reborn into the human realm. And it's very rare for beings from even the heavenly realm to be reborn into the human realm. So these beings, all of us, have been moving throughout all these realms through countless lives. And now that we're in this human birth, let's do everything we can to attain enlightenment so there's no more rebirth whatsoever. But I haven't seen any exact sequencing like that, Nick.
Okay, and then he continues, so if a noble practitioner makes it to the devas, they will attain enlightenment from there. If so, I would rather go to the devas than to be a human again. I know we can't long for it though, but I'd rather go that route than here again. If not, that's okay.
Not necessarily, Nick, because as you hear, a human being can attain the jhanas, move into the heavenly realm, and then be reborn back into the lower realms. The only person who is going to, the only human being who's going to attain enlightenment, or is going to attain a rebirth in the heavenly realm and be guaranteed to attain enlightenment in that realm, is a person who attains the 3rd stage of enlightenment as a non-returner. If you attain the 3rd stage of enlightenment in this human birth, then you will be reborn into the heavenly realm, and then in that existence you will attain enlightenment in the heavenly realm. But a human being can be reborn into the heavenly realm without that. That's possible. It's not just a permanent fixed way, only one way to get to the heavenly realm. There's actually multiple ways to get to the heavenly realm, and there's lots of ways to fall out of the heavenly realm. The only being who's going to for sure attain enlightenment in the heavenly realm is a non-returner, which is the third stage of enlightenment. So instead of setting your goals to get to the heavenly realm and attain enlightenment there, if you're going to make it all the way to the third stage of enlightenment, you might as well keep on going and get to the fourth stage and just end everything here. Forget rebirth. You're not interested in rebirth whatsoever. That's the way I would encourage you to look at this.
Any comments? Okay, thank you, teacher. That's how I understood most things. I just needed some clarifications after reading the wording in those 4 chapters, 88 through 91.
Yeah, very good distinctions there, but definitely focus your time on the core path, getting rid of all those 10 fetters and get to enlightenment in this birth. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that, Nick, and focusing on that and everyone else focusing on that, that's where the real benefits are, because then you get to experience the rest of this life with a completely peaceful mind. Even someone who's in that third stage of enlightenment as a non-returner, if they lived in that for 10, 20, 30 years, they're still experiencing some amount of discontentedness. Very marginal, very little, almost insignificant, but they're still experiencing discontentedness as a non-returner. So it's better to just stay focused on complete elimination of the fetters or the taints or those pollutions of the mind and just end all of it here, so that then, you being a fairly young guy, you can just enjoy the rest of this life, peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, and just know that you're never going to be reborn ever again. You're done with all that misery and despair in this life, and you can completely live life without anger, frustration, sadness, irritation, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, stress, anxiety. All of that's completely gone, and you just get to enjoy the rest of this life with that mental state. And that's where the real benefits are to me. That's where everyone's goal should be.
Teacher David, I was curious to know whether you would agree that the work involved with following the path once you have attained or are near the jhanas and thereafter would be harder than the work that you've done up until the point before this period. So, it almost seems like the work that is involved to continue to be diligent in your practice, to continue to eliminate the fetters and drop the fetters and continue on your path is you have to be resolute, and you have to have confidence, and you have to have clear focus with that. Do you think that that's sometimes harder than even getting up to that point?
In some respects, I agree with what you're saying. In some respects, I don't. Initially, when someone first gets on this path, I think it can be very, very challenging for them because it's all so new. It's all very different. And depending on how heavily defiled the mind is, depending on how much pollution's in the mind, it can be quite difficult to get into this path and even just learn like the Eightfold Path and the 5 precepts and meditation and learning how to do that. If somebody gets to like the 6 months to 12 months mark of learning with me and they're really progressing through there, from that point, for some people, that first part can be very challenging. For others, it's not quite as challenging. But so that's where, in some respects, I agree with you that early on looking back can look easy comparative to getting rid of the fetters, because getting rid of the fetters can be really challenging. But depending on how somebody's mind is, it can actually be quite challenging just to get the first part of the path under your belt and underway. And once you do, if you've done a really good job of that, eliminating the 10 fetters, while it is challenging, it's a whole another level of practice. It's not unsurmountable, especially in order to have gotten even into the jhanas and into the first stage of enlightenment. Somebody would have to have a teacher. Someone can kind of dabble with the Eightfold Path. They can dabble with the 5 precepts and a little bit of meditation and kind of experience some benefits here and there. But really, even to kind of get into the jhanas and that first stage of enlightenment, someone will have to have connected up with a teacher and really gotten close guidance in order to made that much progress. And if you've made that much progress, these other fetters, while they're really challenging, at that point you've kind of got the stage set. By the time you've gotten to the jhanas and the first stage of enlightenment, you deeply understand the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. You got a really solid meditation practice going for yourself. You're experiencing a lot of benefits in those jhanas, and you've got this teacher and all of these teachings available to really continue to progress on this path. So while eliminating things like sensual desire, or eliminating conceit or the self, or some of these other things that are really quite challenging in the 10 fetters, while they're big, while they're challenging, while they can even feel very difficult at times, you've really set the stage with everything, all the other preliminary work that you've kind of struggled through, that you can continue to progress because you've got all the resources you need and the people and the community in your life to be able to make that happen. So some people might find the earlier parts of the path more challenging. Some people might find the latter parts of the path more challenging. It really depends on how heavily defiled your mind is, because the more heavily defiled it is, the more difficult the first part of the path is going to feel. And then as you start clearing out some of that pollution of the mind, the latter part of the path can actually be somewhat enjoyable. Even though there's some struggles, even though there's some real challenges, it can be somewhat enjoyable because you kind of have the tools that you need. It's kind of like if you were going to take on a home improvement project that you've never done before. Let's just say you're going to build a shed in your backyard, and you've never, ever built a shed ever in your backyard. Well, you're going to have to do all this research to figure out how to do it. You're going to have to assemble all the materials, the wood, the nails, the screws, the shingles, the paint. That's a lot of hard work. You're going to have to buy the tools. You're going to have to perhaps get some guidance from some neighbors and some other people, some relatives that have done this before. And that first part of getting the foundation laid nice and level, getting all the tools laid out, kind of getting a discipline of applying your time, effort, and energy to building this shed, it's going to take a lot of work to get it going. But once you get the foundation laid and you get some walls up, from there, it almost becomes somewhat enjoyable because you're kind of have built certain wisdom and you've built certain knowledge along the way that you're just now applying to get the peak roof, to get the shingles laid, to get the gutters around, and kind of, pretty up the shed. That's kind of like the fun part, is like, prettying it up with some paint and some other things like that. So I have thought that the first part is actually quite challenging because that's where you've got to get all the tools and all the pieces in place to set the stage for you to be able to really break through and get over the hump, get through the jhanas and into the stages of enlightenment. So in some ways I agree, in some ways I don't agree. The way that I don't agree is that while the 10 fetters are more significant, and they're bigger, and it's kind of like a bigger project, but by the time you get there, you should have all the tools that you need, and you've got the stage set to be able to really tackle these. So to me, the path doesn't really get harder. It just gets to be a different type of challenge. So instead of learning how to hold a hammer, you're learning how to hold a paintbrush. But the idea behind it is essentially the same. But you by this time we'll have all the tools and all the resources available to you to really push through those 10 fetters.
Thank you. Appreciate you believing that it is not insurmountable to break down some of the fetters and to further in the path.
I don't believe this is what I have in terms of confidence, just from the observation and experiences that I've had. I don't think about belief at all. One thing to also add to what I just shared is, by the time someone's moving through the, first, getting into that first stage of enlightenment, even in the beyond that, you've got a teacher and you've got resources to help you, but by that time you're also amongst a community of practitioners who are all working towards the same goal. Because something like conceit, for example, that would be very challenging for you to eliminate completely on your own out in the forest by yourself, like what a Buddha does, because you kind of need people around you to kind of reflect and say, for you to see guidance from, and for you to see that there's some ego and some conceit there. So like my son, the ego and conceit is one of the things I'm working on with him, that he's still got some ego and conceit there. And you can't always see that yourself, because the ego is arrogance and pride, and it wants you to think that it's not there. So about a week or two ago, my son did something, and I was like, oh, you know what? Since you're doing so well in your practice, I think that you don't need to have TV tomorrow. He's like, oh, no TV for one day? That's easy. I can do 5 days. And I saw that ego there. And I was like, oh, perfect, 5 days then. And then he's like, oh, man, and he got a little bit frustrated. And then I asked him after the 5 days, I said, what did you learn? He said, I learned not to show ego. I said, did you learn not to show ego, or did you learn to eliminate the ego? And he said, I learned to eliminate the ego. He still hasn't eliminated it. He's still working on it. But you need that person. You need other people around you. And by the time you get to the jhanas and the first stage, second stage of enlightenment, you should have other people around you that can kind of help you and kind of observe what's happening. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha suggests that students go visit their teacher, because you need to be in the presence of your teacher, and you need to be in the presence of other practitioners, because we have skillful ways to help you see your ego and help you eliminate it. And it's very difficult to do through online. I mean, there's some things that we can do online. There's a ton that we can do nowadays online, but there's nothing like being in the presence, person to person, with your teacher and or with a community of practitioners that will be able to kind of touch your heart and kind of help you move toward the direction of eliminating ego. And by being involved in a community like here in Thailand, and you are amongst a lot of practitioners who are working in the same direction, you will actually learn a lot just by observing their conduct and their behaviors, and observing how to be a waiter or a food server without ego, or how to be a business executive without ego, or how to be a prime minister or a member high in political government, or how to be a movie star or a celebrity, by practicing these teachings, because you'll see it on TV, you'll see it around you, and then that helps you to kind of be like, aha, I like the way that person did that. I'm going to try to incorporate some of that into my practice. So you kind of learn through osmosis, almost, by being influenced by observing these practitioners in a Buddhist society like Thailand.
Okay.
And that's where it becomes, I feel, in a lot of respects, easier, because by the time you get to those jhanas in the first, second, third stage of enlightenment, you will have the stage set, and you will be part of a community, and you'll have lots of practitioners around you practicing in a way that you can observe and you can be influenced, more so than when you're working in the trenches on things like the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
Yes, I do see some of the points that you're making. So this past week, I've had a mixed bag of experiences. It's been truly a mixed bag of going through daily some changes, some impermanence on my end. And trying to align myself with the core teaching and what I've been practicing for several months. So it does feel like, sometimes it does feel like a test. It sometimes feel, some of the posts which you've made this week have been very important and energizing myself to recall and remember and have confidence in the teaching. So that has been helpful. I have a few thoughts, but until I have a clear question for you, I think I'll hold space and make sure that I come back to you with those questions. But this week has been, in some ways, turbulent for me, and a lot of changes and a lot of impermanence and a lot of things being thrown in the air, and picking up some of those things and investigating what it means for me. So maybe just, as well as raising daughters, a teenager who is 17 years old and about to embark on her own path in university and making her own decisions, living on her own. There's a lot of importance for her to remember some of the values as well, which she's been raised with, as well as some of the teachings of Gotama Buddha. And yesterday she actually had a gathering of, she went to a gathering with lots of friends graduating from high school with her. And some of the friends that she met with were old friends who have migrated to different school systems, but are still graduating 12th grade. And so they all kind of had a reunion of sorts. Some of those friends called her out by her name and happened to mispronounce her name. And one of the things which my daughter is in a space of right now is she's clinging to a form of identity. And this is something that you and I have spoken about before, about the ego and protecting the self, your name, etc. And I was listening to her as she came back home from this event, and she told me, I tapped my friends and said, my name is Anha, it's not Anha. And she felt she needed to do that at that time. And I was just listening to her as she, recalled the experience she had. But I'm almost thinking back to the teaching of the ego, that would it be essential in some ways for an individual to know what not to do in order to choose what to do? So clearly I see in this experience, this direct experience of raising this child and seeing her experiences and me reflecting on my own about, hey, at her age, I was probably doing the same thing. Up until a year ago, I was probably doing the same thing, actually. The name, clarifying how to pronounce a name, etc. So, this all comes back full circle, and sometimes I do am caught in that and reflect in that, and so those are the things that have been happening this week.
So that's probably where your daughter learned it from, right? She picked it up from you, that she saw you correcting people before you were on this path, and you understood impermanence and that it's impossible to permanently get everyone to pronounce your name the way that you want it to be pronounced. So where you see that kind of thing, you can actually clean it up. You can say, honey, I've kind of realized over the last year that it's impossible for me to get everyone to pronounce my name the way that I would prefer. And what's really important is, I know they're talking to me, and I'll talk to them politely, kindly, and friendly. And maybe, there's going to be situations where people aren't going to be able to pronounce the name the way you want them to, and that's okay. And we can train our mind to be comfortable with that, right? So you're going to see these things that you're discovering and unraveling and choosing to no longer do. You're going to see in your children and in the people around you, your husband, that they picked up things that you were doing in the past. And now that you are beyond that and you've gained the wisdom beyond that, this is where you can kind of clean that up with your family and help them a bit. But back to what we were talking about the challenge of enlightenment. one of the ways that I always think about enlightenment and the path to enlightenment is I think about like when you first start the path, it's like standing at the bottom of the mountain and you look up to the top of the mountain, and the mountain always looks extremely tall when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain. And some people don't even attempt to climb the mountain. They just give up and walk away because the mountain looks too tall. But those of you that are on this path, you've decided that, hey, I'd like to climb this mountain. I'd like to try to climb this mountain. And if I don't get all the way to the top of this mountain in this lifetime, well, it's still going to benefit me. And, the mountain will be better off. It may be a smaller mountain in the next life. So as you're starting off on this path up this mountain, oftentimes the first part of that climb can be very difficult and very challenging. And you get to certain parts of the path where you feel on this mountain that there's a little bit of a plateau, and it's like, whoa, that was a little bit difficult the last 5 minutes walking up that mountain, but this part right here feels pretty good. I feel kind of nice. But then next thing you know, it's like, whoa, time to start climbing again. And you start noticing, whoa, I got to start climbing again. And there's some times when you're climbing a mountain that your legs get a bit tired and your feet get a bit tired, and you start losing your energy, and you got to sit down and regain your energy. And you've got to talk to some other people that are on the path to get help. And sometimes the mind gets a little bit complacent and it just wants to sit on that log while everyone else is walking past, and you just want to sit there and be complacent and just be like, no, this mountain's too tall. I should just go back. I was so silly. Why did I even choose to climb this mountain? But if you're around a community of climbers and people who really are interested in climbing this mountain, people who are really interested in this path and have the ability to progress on it, then you can just rest for a period of time, let your legs, let your feet rest, and just keep on walking on the path. And by the time you start getting closer and closer to the top and you're meeting with all this success, the air starts getting fresher. The view starts getting more beautiful. And eventually, when you get to the top of this mountain, you can just see everything in the whole world, and you understand why all of this has been happening to you and why this mind has been so discontent. And you've now transcended that. And you see this beautiful view with all this fresh air, all this beauty of the sunshine coming through. And where typically when you climb a mountain, you then have to go back down the mountain, and sometimes that can be even more challenging than going back up. Well, this mountain to attain enlightenment, once you get to the top of the mountain, it's permanent. You never have to walk back down again. Because once the mind gets this wisdom and progresses to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, you get to enjoy that fresh air and that view, that sunshine for the rest of this life. You never walk back down the mountain ever again, because you're not going to do that. The mind isn't going to do that. Once it attains enlightenment, it can't ever regress. Even in the first stage of enlightenment, it can't regress from there. So if we think about climbing the mountain, once you get to a certain stage of this climb, the mind will never regress from there. So this mountain can look very challenging, can be very difficult. You can even really struggle and crawl and feel pain in your legs at different times. Like maybe it sounds like this week was very testing and very challenging for you. That's normal. And the goal is to just continue on this path, continue progressing, continue to seek guidance with your teacher, continue to dive into the resources, continue to reach out to your community of other practitioners, and continue to climb together as a group. And that's going to be much more beneficial than just always constantly focusing on how difficult it is to climb the mountain. Sure, it's difficult, but you can make it easier on yourself by not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future. Just think about right now. What do I need to do right now to put one more foot in front of me? And maybe that's, in this particular example that you gave, is just talk to your daughter a little bit and help her understand some of the wisdom that you learn, and that you no longer have the expectation that everybody needs to pronounce your name the same way as you pronounce it. And that's okay. And there's never going to be a time where everyone's going to pronounce your name the same. The goal is to have polite, kind, friendly, and respectful relationships with everybody, and trying to kind of force people to pronounce your name a certain way is just going to lead to frustration and madness.
Thank you for your supportive words. There are no more questions as of now.
Okay, any questions with you, Bassem?
Not really, teacher. No more questions on Facebook or YouTube.
Okay, so I'll just thank you all for joining today's class. As you guys know, we do this each Saturday, and we're only another maybe 6 weeks away from ending this part of the first time going through the Pali Canon and English Study Group, and we're going to be restarting this program on August 7th. That's a Saturday, and we're going to be doing it through all the new books that I've been working on, and there's more content there to really help you understand, and we're going to be doing less chapters per week. We're only going to be doing 10 chapters a week. So getting through the rest of the books that we've outlined for this program, that will happen over the next kind of 5 to 6 weeks, and then August 7th we'll restart, and I'm going to kind of show you guys the new books. I'm going to show you guys, kind of a way that we can look at enhancing this program so that you guys can get even more benefit out of this program. Because one of the things that we've really been focused on in this program is just helping you understand the words. When we first started this program, we were using some translations where people were having a lot of challenges just to understand the words. So now that we've kind of transcended that and we've got better translations that you can understand the words, and then underneath of those translations I've put my explanations, where we can really kind of guide this program to in the future is not only studying the words of the Buddha and understanding how I would explain them, but also understanding how to apply them to your day-to-day life. Some of the things that we were talking about today, Manal and I, that you guys were hearing, we can kind of move this program to that, where yes, we're still studying the words of the Buddha, we're still looking at the explanations of the teachings, but how do you actually apply these on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis? So that's what I'm thinking that we can get into, but we'll talk about that more as we progress over the next 5 to 6 weeks. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 16 of the book Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is volume 1 of the Words of the Buddha book series. Chapter 16 is Dissolving the Ego. The ego serves no purpose. This is one of the real challenging parts of this path in eliminating the fetters. It deals with eliminating the personal existence view, which is the very first fetter, and that helps you get into that first stage of enlightenment. And dissolving the ego also deals with eliminating the fetter of conceit, or this taint or this pollution of mind of conceit. So we're going to be talking about that in detail tomorrow at the same time, Sunday at 9 p.m. Thai time. And you can join through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can hear the class on the podcast or the YouTube channel afterwards if you can't make tomorrow's class for some reason. Then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation together as a group. So on Sunday and Wednesday, we've got those 2 upcoming classes. If you guys have any questions as you progress at any time in your practice, you're always welcome to reach out by posting a question in the Facebook group, by asking a question in these online classes, by sending a private message, or by scheduling a personal discussion where we can talk in Zoom, just you and I, and that way you can get some real personalized guidance. And all of this is being offered to you at no cost. It's all offered openly and freely to all of you guys. So I'd like to thank you all for joining. I'd like to thank you for your dedication and your commitment to learning and practicing these teachings. And as you do, life will just get better and better, with some struggles and challenges along the way, but life will just get better and better as you break through those challenges. So I'll see you either Sunday, Wednesday, or next Saturday. Next Saturday, we're going to be studying chapters 104 to chapters 119, I believe it is. Yes, 104 to 119. So we'll see you either next Sunday, which is tomorrow, Wednesday, or Saturday. Until then, have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.